We want to wrestle with the question of hospitality here in Lent. This has been something that Chris Henry has raised repeatedly, and later in the evening I have a little interview that I did with Chris over some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, so you'll get a chance to hear from him. And then he's away this week and he's got something next week, but I think the third week he's going to be with us. But we're trying to think together about this question of hospitality in the life of the church. This scene, as some of you probably know, is a famous depiction of the Trinity, and we're going to be talking a bit about the Trinity as we go through our class together. Okay, Scott. The ministry of hospitality has long played a central role in the practice of Christian witness in the life of the church, welcoming friends and strangers alike into a home or community and offering them companionship, food, shelter, and protection, sometimes even at great risk, has been a core component of communal Christian identity, mission, and practice from the very beginning and throughout its nearly 2,000-year history. So one of the things we'll see over the course of our time is the commitment that the Christian tradition has had to this ministry of hospitality, sometimes even at risk. And we'll tell some stories about that. Okay, Scott. However, today, when we think of hospitality, we often picture family and friends getting together, having a casual meal, or we think about commercial hospitality in hotels and restaurants. I sometimes think about, this is going out, so hopefully the wrong people won't see it, but I remember a commercial a number of years ago about a restaurant. They said, "Come on into our restaurant, we'll treat you like family." And I said to myself, then I'm not going to come. I want to be treated better than that. In this context, the notion of hospitality, in the words of leading theologian and ethicist Christine Pohl, whose book some of us are reading in some other contexts, she says, it has lost its moral dimension. And in this process, most Christians have lost touch with the amazingly rich and complex tradition of hospitality that has animated our tradition. So part of what we want to do in these next few weeks is bring that to our minds again, ask ourselves how we can participate in it. Okay, Scott, in this Lenten season, then, we will explore the rich and vibrant tradition of hospitality, and we're going to look at it in its historical, theological, and practical dimensions, and consider the ways in which a fresh commitment to the practice of hospitality can contribute to the ongoing renewal of the contemporary church in general, and our church in particular. My deep belief is that this core practice of hospitality can transform not just our life here at Second, but the life of the world around us. And as we'll see in the Bible and in the Christian tradition, there's actually a surprising connection between hospitality and salvation. So here's our outline for this evening. First thing we're going to talk about is the God of Christian faith has a mission in the world. So we're going to situate this whole discussion in the context of what we think God is up to. Second, we're going to describe briefly the mission of God and suggest that it is characterized. God's mission in the world is characterized is called to participate in this very thing that God is doing. That is, God has invited us, the followers of Jesus, to participate in God's very life and in this work of salvation. So the suggestion is not just something God did a long time ago and now we're just living in the aftermath of it, but that God's invited us to be integrally involved in that process. And fourth, we're going to look at the practice of hospitality and its centrality to that mission of God in the world, but the way in which that also changes us. Okay, Scott. So the God of the Bible is a God of hospitality. That's one of the most fundamental theses we're going to be talking about. That even as we get closer to thinking about Jesus on the cross, that is a manifestation of God's hospitality. Those who worship this God then are called to embody hospitality to others. It's God's hospitality to us in Jesus that is the basis of our hospitality to others. And as we'll see, this is not an option. Romans 15:7, Paul writes, "Welcome one another, therefore, just as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God." And we're told again and again that Christ's welcome to us, God's welcome to us in Christ, it came at a time when we were even God's enemies. Joshua Jipp, next slide, Scott, in a really fine book, and I'll say more about these books. All the books I'm going to mention tonight are in our library. Okay, but he's got a really fine book that came out in 2017 called Saved by Faith and Hospitality. And he says this experience of God's hospitality is at the very heart of the church's identity. We are God's guests and friends. And it is because of God's extension of hospitality and friendship to us that the church can offer hospitality to one another and to those seemingly outside the reach of our faith community. One of the suggestions that we'll be seeing in the weeks to come is that there is a connection between hospitality and that word we sometimes don't like to talk about, evangelism. So we're going to be exploring that a bit. Next slide. This whole practice, I'd like to suggest, is situated in the mission of God. It's not something that we do apart from what God's already done, but it's part of what God is doing in the world. Some of you heard recently in a Sunday school class, we talked a bit about this, so here's a quick review of that. That one of the most significant and influential developments in the ecumenical movement, that's the global church, talking together in all of its different parts and representatives from all over the world about theology and what God's up to in the world. And one of the most significant developments in the 20th century was the broad consensus that emerged, shared by virtually all theological and ecclesial traditions that participate in that discourse, that the mission of the church finds its rationale in the Missio Dei, that our mission is connected with God's mission, and that's why we have a mission. Next slide. This consensus secured two important theological conclusions. First, that God, by God's very nature, is a missionary God. For some folks, they hear that first time and say, what? That doesn't compute. That doesn't, we think of missionaries as people who probably go far away to take the message of Christian faith to people who haven't heard it. And we've got a kind of history of mission that sometimes makes us think, how comfortable are we with that? One of the fundamental moves that this ecumenical discourse suggested and argued for is that God has a mission in the world. God's a missionary. And second, that therefore the church of this missionary God must therefore be a missionary church. With regard to the first of these points, mission is a part of God's very nature and is expressed in the being and actions of God throughout eternity and made known by the sending of the Son into the world. Here's where we get our term mission comes from, this word for send. So in the Gospel of John, Jesus says to his disciples, "Peace be with you, as the Father sent me." So there's the movement in the life of God as Trinity. We'll talk more about that another time. As the Father sent me, Jesus says, so I'm sending you. And the suggestion is that The church literally is sent by Jesus to continue the work that Jesus was sent to do. Here's that, what I just said. Mission is derived from the Latin words to send and sending. Mission means to send and be sent. And the sending of the Father and the sentness of the Son point to the being and action of God, who is both the sender, the Father, and the one who sent, the Son. And what these theologians and folks who have wrestled with this 20th century idea have concluded is, this means that mission is a part of God's very life. It's something that God has been acting on throughout all eternity. And here's an interesting thought. I'm not going to belabor this at this point. If that's true, and I deeply believe that it is, that means that mission will never end. Right? If mission is a part of who God is, and God is eternal, then mission won't ever end. And if we can get our minds around that, that may help us to rethink what we mean when we talk about mission. Right? If it's not something that ends, when God comes back and puts things to rights. So let's just run through some of this Trinitarianly. Out of love for the world, then, the Father sends the Son into the world. Jesus is sent into the world to redeem it through a cruciform, that means a cross-shaped life, of humility, service, obedience, and death for the sake of others. Jesus calls the world to follow his way of life and participate in the kingdom of God, a community where everyone has enough and no one needs to be afraid. That Jesus' life and mission sent by God is, and we're going to look more at this in the weeks to come, we'll see a bit of it tonight, is not primarily about opening a way so people can get to heaven. It's about changing the world. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't, heaven that's a part of that, something beyond this life, but the point is to change this world, to save the world. And we'll see more of that in a minute. So that's the Son. The Spirit is sent into the world. The Bible uses that same language to call, guide, and empower the community of Christ's followers in their missional vocation. So in that text in John, it says Jesus breathed on them and they received the Holy Spirit. The same Spirit that came on Jesus at the beginning, at the inauguration of his ministry here, is given to the disciples and the church to continue that work. And it's the Spirit that's at work empowering Christ's followers in this missional vocation, which we're going to say more about in a minute. Calling forth a new community from every tribe and nation. And one of the things we're going to talk about later in this 5 weeks is how a really diverse group of people can live together in unity. Some people think, that's impossible. That's what the world needs. If the world is going to be redeemed, that's going to have to be part of it. So the Spirit is calling forth this new community from every tribe and nation centered on Jesus to be a provisional demonstration of God's will for all creation. By the way, that phrase, a provisional demonstration of God's will for creation, comes right out of our Constitution. The provisional is important. We don't think we've arrived, but that's our calling. The extension of this mission into the created order occurs not only through the sending of the Son and the Spirit, so here's the piece, right? But also in the sending of the church. So God's got this mission to redeem the world. More on that in a minute. God sends the Son and the Spirit to accomplish that. But surprisingly, as we saw in our text right at the beginning, Jesus then says, now, in the same way I've been sent, I'm going to send you. David Bosch, a famous South African missiologist who's written one of the most important books on mission in the last 50 years, and it's consistently named one of the 100 most important books written in the 20th century, says that this biblical pattern demonstrates that mission is derived from the very nature of God and must be situated in the context of the doctrine of the Trinity, rather than in ecclesiology, the doctrine of the church, or even soteriology, the doctrine of salvation, right? We're moving the conversation into God's life rather than something that is transacted simply here on earth. From this perspective, next slide, Scott, the classical doctrine, Bosch says, of the Missio Dei expressed as God the Father sending the Son, and the Father and the Son sending the Spirit, that's the classic way it's been understood. It needs to be expanded to include yet another movement, Father, Son, and Spirit sending the church into the world. So that's one piece of imagination that I would like you to think about as we move through Lent together, is that we have been sent into the world by the triune God to participate in the work that God intended in sending Jesus and the Spirit. We are called to continue that. Yes, friends, we have a stake, a role to play in the redemption of the world. Thank God, we're not alone in that. God is with us by the power of the Spirit, but we have a part to play. In keeping with this pattern, the mission of the church is intimately connected with the mission of God and the sending of Jesus and the Spirit. What specifically, then, is the mission of God in relation to the world? And I'd like to suggest we could, teach a whole class on this, but I'd like to suggest for this moment two key ideas, both of which we've already mentioned, love and salvation. So part of the mission of the church is not simply to participate and enjoy God's love, but to live it out in the life of the world. There's a great book by a fellow named Michael Gorman called Paul, Participation in Mission. And the title, that's the subtitle, the title of the book is Becoming the Gospel. And Mike Gorman, a leading New Testament scholar, says what we see over and over again in the New Testament is the writers of the New Testament don't just want the followers of Jesus to believe the gospel, but they want the followers of Jesus to become the gospel, to become the good news that God is enacting in the world. So flowing out of the divine life and Trinity, love, of course, is central to the mission of God. We see that again and again. The greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. The primacy of love is underscored in the relationship of God to the church. Here's 1 John. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed to us in this way, because the question always is, okay, what's love then? That God sent, there's our mission word again, his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. Quick add, if you want to know more about what this atoning sacrifice is, in the run-up to Easter at 9:30 on Sunday morning, starting the last week of March, we're going to spend time thinking about what that means. Beloved, then, since God loved us so much, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is perfected in us. I've always been captivated by this idea that God's love is made perfect in us. I think part of what this is telling us here is that love is not just an abstract notion, but it's a verb. It's real. It's something that we participate in. We give, we receive it, and we share it. The church is called to bear witness to the love of God by imitating the life of Christ and living God's love. The end of the mission of God, then, as it is expressed in the world, through the life of Jesus and the witness of the church, is salvation. So if you can imagine this, God from all eternity is love. We are invited to participate in that love, but we know in our story that we tell that humanity rebelled against that love. We sought our own good at the expense of those around us. We developed societies that were oppressive, that marginalized some, that said to some people, you're not worthy of being a part of this, and pursuing our own ends, sought to enrich ourselves. And God's response is to redeem that world. Paul writes in Romans 1:16, I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God for salvation to everyone who has faith, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. If you were with us in the fall when we went through Romans, both slowly and quickly, in 8 weeks, we saw how important this idea of salvation is for the bringing of Jew and Greek together. For Paul, a Jew, that encompasses the whole world. And it's the very focal point of the text we read at the beginning. Welcome one another just as Christ welcomed you. Paul's urging that to this community at Rome because Jews and Greeks are very different people. They have different cultures. They have different ideas about God. They have different ideas about the right day to worship and the things you ought to eat or not eat. They have lots of different ideas to the point that in many ways they despised each other. And yet in Christ, Paul's argument is they come together. The walls of hostility are torn down. But now comes the challenge of living together with people that are more different than you can imagine. And that's the driving force of Romans. That's fundamental to the salvation that God intends to enact in the world in Jesus. The salvation then entails the liberation of the created order. Humanity, and according to Romans, the entire cosmos, from the powers of sin and death. Paul's vision, the vision of the New Testament, is not primarily about plucking a few individuals out of this mess who happen to believe the right things so that at the end we will be okay. No, it is a grand cosmic vision of the liberation and salvation of the whole world that we are invited to participate in. So in the same way that the mission of God in Jesus Christ to love the world is passed on to the church, so the mission of salvation and reconciliation is also entrusted to the church. If we had continued reading that text in John chapter 20, we would have seen Jesus make this direct point to those early disciples. In the Gospel of John, one of the fundamental things that Jesus comes to do to bring peace and salvation is to forgive sins. And yet in that very text, the next thing that Jesus says is, so now whoever sins you forgive, whoever sins you forgive, they are forgiven. Whoever you don't, they're not. You are going to continue my work. Commenting on this conception of the divine mission, Michael Gorman, in the book that I mentioned, Becoming the Gospel, Paul, Participation in Mission, observes that God is therefore at work, creating an international network of multicultural, socioeconomically diverse communities that participate in this liberating, transformative reality now, even if incompletely and imperfectly. There's the big picture. God at work to redeem the world through the development of these kinds of diverse communities that break down the divisions and the hostilities that divide us. And here's the question: how does that start to happen? Because we know through evolutionary psychology, if David Chaddock were here, he could give a great lecture on this, that we're hardwired, We're going to hang out with people like us. When we see people who are different, our tendencies think, whoa, I'm going to be careful here. These people are different. That's our tendency. How do we begin to break that down? How does that begin to change? And in the New Testament, a fundamental practice where that begins to occur is hospitality. We get to know others. Here's the teaching of Jesus on this notion of hospitality. We're going to look at two texts. Luke 14, 12 through 14. When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Don't just hang out with the people that you know, the people that you like. Usually the people that we like are people that are like us. But show hospitality to the marginalized, the people that aren't like you, the people whose lives may be inconvenient for you, the people who you get to know that can't benefit you directly. Second text, Matthew 25, 34 and 40. Come, you that are blessed by my Father. This is Jesus speaking in Matthew. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. And what's the salvation? By what are you saved? For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you, a stranger, and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me." These two texts, we will mention others as we work through our time together, but these two texts in particular have been central in shaping the Christian tradition of hospitality. And the distinction that we talked about at the very beginning between conventional hospitality and Christian hospitality. It's not bad when you have family members over to eat, right? But if that's all you do, you're not practicing strictly Christian hospitality. Christian hospitality is moving beyond those circles of comfort. Jesus challenges narrow definitions of hospitality and presses them outward to include those with whom we are less likely to desire connectedness. The poor, infirm, socially marginalized come with needs and conditions that are inconvenient and with little or no capacity for reciprocation. Christine Pohl, in her book Making Room, on page 21 says this: ordinary hosts invited friends, relatives, and rich neighbors to their banquets. In so doing, they solidified relationships, reinforced social boundaries, and anticipated repayment from their guests. By contrast, hosts who anticipated the hospitality of God's kingdom welcomed the poor, lame, crippled, and blind, those who were more dependent and lived on the margins of the community. I want us to note here, and we'll come back in the weeks ahead and pick up on this theme, the reinforcement of social boundaries. Like, left to our own devices without thinking about it, we tend to hang out with people like us. We tend to develop communities and even churches populated by people like us. And one of the questions that we want to ask ourselves, and that Chris Henry is asking, is, okay, how can we connect with the people around us in the North Indy community of Washington Township in which we are situated? In addition, the implications of the Matthew text for hospitality are intensified through the identification of Jesus himself as the one being welcomed. And the classic line that really dominates the Christian tradition of hospitality, that you see it in text after text after text: "I was a stranger and you welcomed me." This idea has become the most important touchstone in the development of the Christian hospitality tradition. It's found throughout the ancient texts, as well as contemporary reflection on the centrality of hospitality in the mission of God in the world. Acts of welcoming the stranger, or failing to do so, take on heightened significance when it is Jesus himself who experiences the effects of hospitality or the lack of it. Dorothy Day, a name some of you will know, cited by Christine Pohl in her book, says this. It's a powerful statement. "There he was, homeless. Would a church take him in today? If this itinerant preacher, this Palestinian Jew, were wandering around, would a church take him in today, feed him, clothe him, offer him a bed?" She says, "I hope I ask myself that question on the last day of my life. I once prayed that God would never, ever let me forget to ask that question. In the Christian tradition of hospitality, this is one of the central questions. And it's one of the driving forces throughout the New Testament in changing the social order and saving it from the ways of sin and death, the ways of destruction. Many New Testament scholars today, and I've mentioned just a couple, are really raising questions about notions of salvation that suggest that it's simply about believing the right things, so justified by faith alone, and now you can do what you want. And, hang out with who you want to, gather wealth for yourself. That's not the Christian message. In fact, an increasing number of scholars, I've mentioned Joshua Jipp, are talking about things like justification through faith by hospitality. And we see that again and again in the witness of the New Testament. We mentioned the Matthew text, and probably many of you are aware, I didn't read what comes after the portion of the text we read, but the next portion of the text is turning to those who saw Jesus thirsty and didn't give him something to drink, saw him naked and didn't clothe him, saw him hungry and didn't feed him, knew that he was in prison and didn't visit. And they said, "Lord, when did we see you that way?" And Jesus says, to the extent that you didn't do it for those that you saw, those that you knew about, you didn't do it for me. And he says, depart. So we can wrestle with that. Lots of theology we could talk about. I just want to leave you with the notion that this is central to the ways of Jesus in the world that he invites the church, you and I, to participate in. And so this quote by Dorothy Day, I think, as we enter into Lent, is a great question to ask ourselves. And one of the challenges is that to enact this kind of life may call us to change some things, to ask, how might we amend ourselves to be more faithful to this vision for our sakes, the sake of the church, but also for the sake of the very mission that God is trying to do in the world. A friend of mine has a recent book that's just come out with the title, so don't get too, but simply, God Can't. God can't. That God doesn't choose to just miraculously come into the world and solve all the problems. And my friend says, yeah, God's chosen not to do that, and so God can't do that. What God does is calls a people to continue the work that God wants to see done. Yeah, we have God's help, and we need to depend on that. But I also think it's true, if we, the church, don't participate in this work, in many crucial respects, it will not be done. We can talk more about that as we move through. I want to mention these 5 books as we conclude this evening, although we're going to hear from Chris Henry in just a minute, that are in the library, that are, you'll see these pop up from time to time in our class. Joshua Jipp, Saved by Faith and Hospitality, makes a strong biblical case of the intimate connection between salvation and hospitality. And in the second half of the book, talks about hospitality as the means by which we in the world overcome things like racism, greed, xenophobia, and the like. Matthew Kamink His book, Christian Hospitality and Muslim Immigration in an Age of Fear, directly addresses a question that is roiling our nation and addresses it from a Christian perspective. Powerful text. Amy Oden has produced a really outstanding source book on hospitality in early Christianity, so that you can get a sweeping sense of what our tradition has said from the very beginning after the time in which the Bible was produced. Christine Pohl's classic book, Making Room, Recovering Hospitality as a Christian Tradition, is a book that is seen by many as reigniting the hospitality tradition in the church. That was published about 1999, so it's pretty close, 20 years old now. Still a classic. We've got groups, a group at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning reading this book, a group at 9:30 on Sunday morning reading this book, and a PW group that meets on Monday reading this book. If you're interested in reading along with a group of people, check out one of those groups during Lent. And then finally, Amos Young, Hospitality and the Other, talks about this idea that we engage in hospitality, particularly to people who aren't like us. Again, it's not saying it's bad to share hospitality with our friends and neighbors, but if that's all we do, then we're not really participating in gospel-centered hospitality. Now, here's some questions that I asked Chris Henry in anticipation of the class. As I mentioned at the beginning, Chris has been talking since he got here, really his first charges to staff, on a renewed emphasis on hospitality. So I sat down with him and asked him these 5 questions, and we're going to watch now that interview and hear him respond. And as you listen to him, I'd like you to be thinking about these questions yourself. I know they're addressed to him, but how would you think about these things? And we will have time as we move through our class to interact together. So we're going to watch Chris, and then I'm going to ask you to spend maybe 10 minutes, turn to your neighbors, gather with, and talk about these things, and then we'll have about 20 minutes to interact together before we dismiss for the evening. Okay, Scott, roll it.
I'm John Franke, theologian residence here at Second Presbyterian Church.
Volume up.
And this Lent we are preparing to teach a class on hospitality as Christian witness. And this is one of the most important practices in the life of the church. And I thought it would be great to sit down with our new senior pastor. Well, I don't know if he's still new, but he's been here since June. And just talk a little bit about hospitality with Chris Henry. Chris, you've mentioned since you got here several.
I can only say that it worked when we did it in test mode.
Several times, and your first charge of the staff, that hospitality was something that you were really concerned about. And you've mentioned that, well, you've appreciated as you've gotten to know the church, the profile in the community, the degree to which we're welcoming. You've also said that you think that we could
well-connected people. And so part of the reason why I think it's a challenge for us is because we know ourselves to be such a hospitable community. And one of my favorite things that happens around here is when a worshiper comes for the first time and says to me on the way out, and it happens pretty regularly, boy, I didn't realize this was such a warm and welcoming community. And what a gift that once they get here, they experience that. For me, our challenge is for that to be the word on the street, not just the experience of the worshiper here.
As you think about that, are there other ways that you wonder if we're as welcoming to new people as we could be? I mean, so yeah, architecture it looks foreboding? Are there other things that you observe that we might live into more easily since it takes time to change the building?
Yeah. And let me be very clear, I have no plans to change the beautiful buildings at Second Presbyterian Church. It's one of the things that drew me here was the beauty of this place and really the sanctuary. I mean, I feel like in the deepest sense of the word, this space is sanctuary, holy space set apart for the worship and service of God. And so I don't foresee us making dramatic changes in that regard. Instead, I think it's more about being able to tell the story of the vibrant community that worships and serves in this place. And so one of my mentors used to say that 50 years ago or 100 years ago, there was one door in and out of church, and that was the Sunday morning worship door. The way that you experienced the community the very first time was that you came to a worship service on Sunday morning. And certainly now, and I think for the foreseeable future, that's going to be one of the main ways that people first become acquainted with Second. But one of the great gifts of the life of this community is that it is so varied and so diverse. And that one's encounter, primary or first encounter with Second, might be a concert on a Sunday afternoon, or it might be a class offered on a Wednesday evening, or it might be bringing your children on weekday mornings to Children's Circle. It might be that your counselor is here and so you come to Centerpoint. It might be that you come for a summer or fall sale. It might be that you're involved in a community service project that involves Second. And so you know about the church through this wide, there are hundreds of doors into Second in terms of involvement. My prayer would be that each of those is a place of hospitality, and so that they're not ends unto themselves, but means into, pathways into that deeper engagement with the life of the community. We are blessed right now, Sarah and I, to be Children's Circle parents. So both of our boys are here, Sam 3 days a week and Ben 2 days a week in preschool. And what I experience on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning when I drop our boys off here is a whole nother part of the community that is Second Presbyterian Church. And I see the hospitality of Kara Paul standing at that intersection, greeting every child that comes up. And I know that for her, that is an embodiment of her Christian faith, calling her to hospitality. My prayer is that hospitality would be an invitation into deeper engagement. So hospitality is the beginning of that process. Spiritual growth is the next step of that.
So as you've started to know the North Indianapolis community in particular, as well as the church, who's not part of our fellowship that you'd like to see here?
I say that there are only two types of people. There are members of Second and future members of Second. Right. So my prayer is that every person in this area would consider themselves invited to be a part of the fellowship and the mission and the worship that happens here. My mentor in Atlanta, Joanna Adams, used to say that the most important question in ministry is the question, who is not here yet? Emphasis on the word yet, because that invitation should always be there. So as I look around, I see the invitation to deeper diversity that surrounds us, ways to be invitational of those who live in our neighborhood and in our community who may not look the way we look, or the way the majority of our worshiping community looks. I think that's one of those places where different doors into the life of the congregation might be helpful. That worship may not be the first encounter, but after having gotten to know some members of the congregation through other ways or experienced the ministry of the church in some other ways, worship might flow from that. I also think about the wide age demographic that we have at Second and how we can be intentional about highlighting that as one of the gifts of this place, that we want our young children to know 80 and 90-year-olds. That's important to us. And my experience is that that's important to parents of young children sort of across the board. And so one of the things that we have to offer is a beautifully diverse population in terms of age, all of whom care for and about each other. And so I think of that as, we've got wonderful schools in our area. We've got, we've got folks who live farther out. We've got folks who live close in. So in a way, the city is our parish. I know Bill Enright used to speak of this. If it's a cathedral church, then that means it's a church for the city, and I would say for the city and points north and south of the city, really a church for the region. So I would say anyone who is not yet here are the ones who I would love to reach out to and practice that Christian hospitality with.
I'm wondering if you mentioned diversity and the diversity of our area. Do you, as you think about being that kind of welcoming community for everyone and all people, what sort of changes, do you have a chance to reflect on the kinds of changes that you think might be challenges for this congregation to be more welcoming of even greater diversity than we have here now?
I think sometimes simply saying that we are open to or want to experience and welcome greater diversity is the first step. That making an explicit effort at that. I think of opportunities to engage with the broader community that give us that chance as well. We've got this symposium coming up on the music and legacy of Florence Price, and lifting up the voices of those from more diverse backgrounds, both in our community now and those who have come before us, I think is an important part of that. I also think that I think sometimes churches stretch themselves thin in an effort to literally be all things to all people. And what I have seen work more effectively than that is to be really clear about what our strengths are. And I think what we will find is that does draw a diversity of folks as the word gets out. I think that lifting up voices, as our brief statement of faith puts it, voices of peoples long silenced. So inviting into leadership those who might have voices that have not been a part of the leadership of our church. And then being in intentional engagement with community partners and congregations in our city as well. So I think there are ways to honoring what is good and strong at Second, and accentuating and really emphasizing that welcome to all people that will draw folks in.
Yeah. So we've been talking a little bit about Second specifically. I'm wondering if you have, just generally speaking, if you think about the idea of hospitality and the role that hospitality plays in helping people get a new sense of vision for what God's doing in the world. I wonder if you have thoughts about that. What's good about hospitality?
Well, I think about two things. I think about the ministry of Jesus, and I think about the early church in the book of Acts. And in both cases, there is an emphasis on table fellowship. And for me, the best experiences of hospitality that I have had, either as host or far more often for me as guest, have been experiences of sharing a meal. I don't think it's any coincidence that the central repeated sacrament of the Christian faith involves a table and bread and cup. And that we gather around that table not just on Communion Sundays, but every single Sunday when we gather in worship, there is a table at the center of our worship space. And so I think for me, experiences of sharing meals, and the beautiful thing is that communion happens in restaurants and in dining rooms and at kitchen counters and in a wide variety of places, that anywhere where people build community with Christ at the center, communion is celebrated. And so I think that can be transformative. I think sharing a meal with someone who disagrees with you, sharing a meal with someone who is different from you, sharing a meal with someone with whom you would just like to build a deeper relationship or have or have a meaningful conversation. I think it is important that we share meals together. Sarah has been in conversation with a church in Brazil that has been a rapidly growing congregation, but they have a rule around evangelism, and the rule is you can't invite anybody to church until that person has had dinner in your home. I think that speaks to the value of hospitality, because what they say is, we don't want just numbers for numbers' sake, or we don't want you inviting people to church just so you can say you invited them to church. We want you to be in relationship with people, and then through those relationships, we want you to exercise hospitality into the Christian community. I was saying at a Together at 5 worship service a couple of weeks ago that it's interesting to me that if I go to a restaurant I really love, one of the first things I want to do is give them an online review and tell all my friends, you got to try this new restaurant. It's fantastic, great food. You want to be a part of it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had that posture toward our church? I think many of us love the life and ministry of this congregation. What if we wanted to invite others in a relational way, in the same way that we want to share good news about a great dry cleaner, for example?
Great. So sometimes we talk about an idea like hospitality, and it's so big, and we think, yeah, we're doing so much, but we could do so much more, and it can seem overwhelming. I wonder if you were going to give one focus challenge to our congregation here, what that might be. If you're going to say, hey, we're going to talk about a lot of great things, but here's something that I'd really like to see us hone in on as a way to start this move to greater hospitality.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think having some places so that we can start today. I led a series of small group gatherings back in Atlanta with a wonderful resource manual titled "Don't Invite Them to Church," and the idea was we have to start by knowing our neighbors. So I think of that as kind of an interesting first step. We live in a time when many of us do not interact with the people who live the closest to us. And I think, what if we were to just begin by saying, I'm going to build relationships with those closest to me, the parents at my children's school, the people who live in my neighborhood, the folks who go to the same grocery store, the people who work out next to me in the gym, the people who eat next to me in the dining hall, whatever the context might be. What if we started by saying, that is a beloved child of God whom Christ has called me to love. And that is a person whom God has placed in my path, who I can build a relationship with. Now, it could be that they're a person of deep religious faith and they have a different faith community, and that's wonderful. You can share stories about that. But it also may be that they are searching for what a place like Second can provide for them. So I wonder if the first step of hospitality isn't just to know the people who surround you on a daily basis.
Right. Well, thanks very much. Chris has given us a lot to think about, and I want us to keep these ideas in our minds as we look forward to Lent and as we move through it together and think about how we can become an even more hospitable community as part of our witness to our faith in Christ.
A series of small group gatherings back in Atlanta with a wonderful resource manual titled "Don't Invite Them to Church," and the idea was we have to start by knowing our neighbors. So I think of that as kind of an interesting first step. We live in a time when many of us do not interact with the people who live the closest to us. And I think, what if we were to just begin by saying, I'm going to build relationships with those closest to me, the parents at my children's school, the people who live in my neighborhood, the folks who go to the same grocery store, the people who work out next to me in the gym, the people who eat next to me in the dining hall, whatever the context might be. What if we started by saying, that is a beloved child of God whom Christ has called me to love. And that is a person whom God has placed in my path, who I can build a relationship with. Now, it could be that they're a person of deep religious faith and they have a different faith community, and that's wonderful. You can share stories about that. But it also may be that they are searching for what a place like Second can provide for them. So I wonder if the first step of hospitality isn't just to know the people who surround you on a daily basis.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Chris has given us a lot to think about, and